showing up this morning. I was a little reluctant to even send in a title for my presentation today using the word existentialism, because I figured half of you wouldn't show. Because existentialism is a misunderstood thing, but it's actually one of my favorite themes, and I want to help you understand it in a little different way, because I think that, like me, many of you, when you think of existentialism or hear of existentialism, you think of Camus and Sartre, and the whole the idea that life has no meaning, and it's pretty depressing. But the truth of the matter is that existentialism started a long time before the 1920s, and the French sort of adopted that worldview. Actually, it goes back to Soren Kierkegaard, who lived from 1813 to 1855. So it's been around a long time. And Kierkegaard was the son of a preacher. He's Danish, and he was destined to be clergy. And he went off to college to study for the ministry, and he studied theology, but he was not happy with it. There were a lot of questions, way too many questions, and he couldn't seem to be able to come up with some adequate answers for it. So he moved more in towards philosophy, and he wrote a lot of works anonymously, trying to express what's Fear and Trembling is the name of one of his earliest works, when he was faced with the reality of God and trying to understand what God is and what his relationship with God is and should be. And he had a crisis of faith, really, essentially, and he dropped out of seminary and really became a philosopher rather than a theologian. But in order to understand existentialism, first I want to start off I want to read something to you, and I hope you don't tune out too much. This is from the Stanford Dictionary of Philosophy, and it is a little long, but I think it's essential. I will unpack it once we go through it, but I think this is a really, really good introductory to the idea of existentialism as it came from Kierkegaard, not from Camus and Sartre. The existentialist critique of theoretical detachment was pioneered by Kierkegaard, whose scorn was directed at Hegel, a philosopher who adopted the perspective of eternity to build a metaphysical system that provides complete knowledge of reality. If you think back to your college courses in philosophy, what you know and how you know it becomes the leading issue for most philosophers. By taking a disengaged and panoptic view, Kierkegaard argues that Hegel's system covers the deeply personal project of being human and the specific needs and concerns of the existing individual. But it makes no subjective approach, and therefore transforms existence into something indifferent and something vanishing. Kierkegaard reverses that tradition when it comes to the question of existence. That's his basic problem. The problem with existentialism is we exist. Here we are. We exist. That's the problem. Not what we know or how we know it, but we exist. And what do we do with that? This means that abstract truths of philosophical detachment are always subordinate to the concrete truths of the existing individual. The real subject is not the cognitive object. The real subject is the ethically existing subject, you and me. Got it? That's really pretty simple, really. The problem is that we exist. And so what are we going to do? And philosophers spend a lot of time trying to argue about the process of how we know things and what's true. What's true? You all know what's true, right? And how do you know? You know because everything is subjective. And that's essentially what he's saying. Life is subjective. Truth is subjective. It's not this objective something else out there that philosophers and approaches can find for us. It's what we have. And that really was his struggle, because he was faced with, as a clergy person, he's supposed to be able to preach the truth about God and Christianity. And he said, but my truth is not necessarily your truth. So he had a crisis of faith. And he realized that Christianity may or may not be true. Now that's really a troublesome issue for non-Unitarian and Universalist clergy. So he said, okay, so what am I going to do with this? And so he said, Christianity works for me. So I am going to be a Christian. Not because I know it's true, but because it works for me. And it is a system which gives my life meaning and purpose and direction. So I am going to be a good Christian. The key thing here is that he admits to himself and to the rest of the world that he doesn't expect anybody else to necessarily believe in the same things. And he himself says, you know, it might not actually be true. Wow. So the existential problem is, what do we choose to define our life? What do we choose as the meaning in our life? What do we choose to give our life meaning and direction and purpose? And that's a really, 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 really difficult problem for Unitarians and Universalists, because we come here often from other denominations, other faith, religions, or whatever, and we absolutely love the freedom here, don't we? Right? Admit it. We love being not told what to believe. We love not having to learn a catechism. We love that freedom from dogma and doctrine. Right? Give me an amen. We love it. And yet the problem doesn't go away, because we so embrace the freedom from that we forget the freedom to. We forget the responsibility to create a system that we will adopt to give meaning and purpose and direction to our own lives. We tend to be wandering. I don't know how you individually feel, but in 30 years of ministry, I've had so many people come to me in times of crisis because they haven't done the work. They haven't created that faith system, that basis in faith, whatever you want to call it, that can hold you up in times of difficulty. And they find themselves all of a sudden adrift. When I was in seminary, I went to a Christian seminary. It was one of the best things I ever did. I had the option, we lived outside Boston, I had the option to go to Harvard. And I don't know how many of you have ever been to Harvard? I hate to ask this, because everybody I ever knew that went to Harvard said, when I was at Harvard. Or if they're subtle, they say, when I was in Cambridge. Well, I was in Newton. And I went to a seminary that was more directed towards pastoral care than towards intellectualism. And I really think, and my wife thanks goodness for that too. but at Andover Newton Theological School, I had a professor of systematic theology, and he had written a number of books about Christianity. And systematic theology, Thomas Aquinas wrote whatever it was, 144 volumes on a systematic theology. He asked every question you could ever ask and answered every single one of them. And he was sainted for that. But he taught systematic theology, which meant, what do you do with evil? What's the basis for morality? What is your belief in the infinite and eternal? What is your response to the necessity of death? Why do bad things happen to good people? And more importantly, why do good things happen to bad people? That's a systematic theology. That's working on what I was talking about we all need to create a systematic theology that will hold us up in times of trouble. And so he taught systematic theology. And for him, it was very clear because he had a catechism. He had a Christian catechism. He had an answer for every one of these questions that the church had essentially looked at for hundreds of years. And I really, really, really appreciated this man because we had lunch several times. There were 8 of us Unitarians there at the seminary, so they were used to some of the questions that we would ask. But he said to me, he says, it's important for you to understand systematic theology, not so that you have the answers that I give you because they're my answers, but that you will then struggle with the answers that you need to have in your life. And that's when I first began to understand that being a Unitarian or a Universalist requires a great deal of work. I'm sorry, I have to tell you that, but it's true. Because we're not handed something. We have to do the hard work to figure out what's going on and what our subjective reality is. Not even necessarily what's true, but what works. What gives my life meaning, purpose, and direction? That's a difficult question that I offer you to take home and work on. And there will be a test next week. Because I have the right answers. No, but seriously, the problem is that we have to let go of the notion that there is an objective, abstract truth somewheres, and that everything is relative. I had another professor in theology school that taught ethics, and I had a problem with him because he was a self-avowed, quite strict Christian, and I have no problem with Christians. It's just some of the people that tend to be Christian. And we were having a conversation about the basis of ethics. And he said, well, as a non-believer, and I'm a non-believer, that's another Sunday. As a non-believer, he says, everything's relative for you then. And I said, yeah. I said, and everything's relative for you too. And he says, no, it isn't. He says, I have a system. And I says, yeah, but you've chosen that system. That means that it's all relative to your choice of that system. He didn't like that at all. Because his system was held up as an absolute truth. And that's what I'm trying to say. That's so impressive about Soren Kierkegaard. He said, I'm going to be a Christian. I don't know if it's true or not, but it works for me. That's the essence, I believe, of existentialism. There is no meaning and purpose and direction in life, but we're all faced with making a decision about how we answer the problem that we exist. So as I've been speaking, hopefully you've been paying attention. And so what I'd like to do, this is on now, hopefully. What I'd like to do is to wander around and garner some of your wisdom. What are your thoughts, your own personal responses to this whole idea of the responsibility of existentialism? And we don't leave till we're done.
My name is Stacy, and I know Greg. He used to be my minister, so I'm really happy to be listening. And I'm just delighted because last night I was organizing all my journals and putting stuff on the binding saying which ones were notes I took listening to Tara Brach or Jack Kornfield or all the other meditation heroes I love. And I'm like, wow, I'm kind of like a Thomas Aquinas wannabe because I have all these journals where I've been asking questions and I go to my teachers and I try to understand how they answered them, and then I try to answer it for myself in my own life as a mom, as a social worker, as a lost soul on a little boat in the middle of the ocean of life. So I have a lot to think about. Thank you.
My name is Paula Tyner, and I'm a musician. Excuse me. I came from a lot of pollen in Florida. A lot of my answers have come from music that I've listened to, and Iris DeMent wrote a song called Let the Mystery Be. I don't know if anybody's ever heard it, but she answered the question for me in that song with the line, what's the line? I believe in love and to live my life accordingly, and I choose to let the mystery be.
There certainly are a lot of brilliant people that have written for thousands of years, and I think it's good to do your research and to be moved by these people. My only real concern is when people claim to have some kind of special revelation. Insight is good, but I think I have to say that I've been doing this for 30 years, and one of the reasons I do this is because after the service, people will come up to me and say, I was going to say something, but I didn't. And I say, that's a gem. And you folks are sitting here with some beautiful gems that come on.
I have no answers, and that's okay, but I'm very happy to hear your message because to me there's just such a freedom in the idea that I get to make that it's a subjective, and it's not just the Unitarian thing of I can do whatever I want, but growing up in a dogmatic religion and feeling like it just didn't make sense to me, but then being able to the joy, the play, the work is actually a lovely thing. And the idea that it's not all relative necessarily, to me, it's not all relative. That I have my truths and that I'm working through them and that they change all the time. Like I have some that I've stuck with, and then I have some where I'm shifting. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I get to do that rather than, have to say the same thing every week. So...
What you said there about I get to think or believe whatever I want to. I hear that a lot. I've heard that a lot from people, and I'm essentially agreeing with you. That's not true. We don't get to believe whatever we want to believe. That's why we're here. Because I would love to believe in heaven. I would love to believe in God. but it just doesn't make any sense to me, and it's not who I am, so it doesn't work for me. So we're not ever free to believe whatever we want to believe. We're free to believe what we have to believe because of who we are. And then Soren Kierkegaard goes into great depth talking about we are products of our communities and of our culture and of our experiences.
Kathy, you remind me of an experience that is the reason I think I'm here. And that was, I was on the session of a local Presbyterian church. And in that, the minister asked us to judge the statements of faith of new members, potential new members. And I sat and read these statements, and I thought, well, I don't know about them, but I now know about me. I don't belong. This is not what I believe. And it took me probably 10 years at least to figure out that because I didn't even know what a Unitarian church was. And here I am, and I love it. But it is freedom to me, and but I'm still looking and trying to figure it all out. I hope I do that soon.
Well, I don't know. There is a Unitarian Universalist curriculum called Building Your Own Theology. Have you guys done that? I mean, it is a real stretch for a lot of us because we're reluctant to do that because it means some real deep soul searching in and of ourselves. But what if we had to write a statement of faith for entry into this church? And nobody, sorry? Well, yeah, I was just going to say, but nobody's going to judge it, but they're going to ask you to do it. That's the problem, right? So your assignment is, for next week, no, that's what I would really, I guess, leave you with. I don't know how much, I don't want to go too long.
Well, I've come to grips, or I'm struggling to come to grips with there is one, when you say existence, there is one there is one absolute that goes along with existence, and that is its end. And you know, most of my life, my future has been infinite. You know, I haven't had to think about that. But I just turned 80 last year, and I'm starting to see that. And it's like, okay, what do I need to do to handle that? Basically, to live my life in such a way that end is okay.
Well, that's what I was saying is I've been with a lot of people towards the end of their lives, and the ones that have done the hard work are at peace with themselves, and the ones that have not done the hard work are struggling. And that's a point I don't want to get to myself. So you were talking about words of wisdom. I just want to end with one thing. In my office, I had a slogan on the wall from May Sarton, who said that we convert, meaning we influence people, essentially, I think. We convert, if at all, not by demanding the impossible, but by being irresistible. So I leave you with the invitation to be irresistible.